Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. We're really excited. Both Elise and I have a lot of experience helping parents in these difficult times. Um, we'll get into more of what we do later, but I just want to tell you that we're really grateful that you're here because we hear a lot of families that are struggling, and we want to help. So we're offering this presentation in order to give a lot of strategies and to help you as much as we can. So this webinar is entitled Your Unique Struggling Learners, Making the Current School Situation Work for Them. And as you know, we are in a very unique time. So we have unique time and we have your unique learners, and a lot of them are struggling. And if you're here, it's probably because your child is struggling based on what we're going to be talking about today. So again, we're going to be hopefully giving some strategies and some things to think about in order to help your child do better during this time.
And also, I just want to note, Stephanie and I did a run through of their presentation. We have included so much information for you, and the hour was a little bit of a tight squeeze. So we're going to be talking a little fast at sometimes, just trying to get everything in. But you will be getting a copy of this presentation later on down the road, so that anything that we kind of glossed over or raced through a little bit, you can either ask questions on the ends, but you'll also have this presentation to refer to.
Yes, absolutely. And again, if you didn't hear, we just appreciate if you could put your camera off and your microphone off. Well, this video is being recorded, so we're just like to not have people's faces on there until the end. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay.
You got it?
Okay. Okay, there, it's working now. Okay, who are we? Elise, who are you? Tell us about you.
I'm Elise Doran. I am the founder and owner of Elevated Learning Solutions. We are a holistic group, primarily of academic support professionals, tutors, executive functioning coaches. We provide strength-based strategies for students. And our focus is special education students, are struggling learners. All of my tutors and I are all the special ed backgrounds. And we collaborate very closely with tutors and we are the tutors, with parents and all school professionals and outside providers in order to be able to close any communication gaps and have a tight knit support network. I also help parents go through IEPs and accommodations to help them understand what's going on and make sure that their child is getting supported in the best way possible.
Yes. And I can attest that Elise does amazing work, and her tutors do as well. We work in collaboration sometimes. So, I'm Stephanie Frumkin, and I'm an educational consultant, and I'm the founder of Exceptional Educational Solutions. And I also have a collaborative and holistic approach in how I work with families. The thing that I do mainly is I help parents find school options, and I help give them clarity on what the best school fit is for their child. So if you have an out-of-the-box learner who's struggling, I help parents give them clarity and help them find the best school fit. And that could be in both traditional or alternative education. I do also help with school advocacy. So and helping getting your child what they need, either in public school or even in private school, advocacy can come into play. And these days I've been helping a lot of parents with distance learning support because, again, these are challenging times. Have background in education, and again, I take the holistic approach, so I'm able to pull it all together and help parents during these challenging times. So what we're planning to cover today is knowing your child. That's first and foremost. And so we're going to cover some distance learning strategies and accommodations for various areas of strength and need. We're going to have a fun, cool movement break that Elise is going to do. And we're going to talk about choosing the best school options, my favorite topic. And then we're going to get to question and answers at the end. So we would just very much appreciate if if you keep the microphones off and the cameras off until the end, this webinar will be recorded and you will receive a replay of it. And we will also provide the slides to you. So please check your email at after the webinar, and we will be happy to provide that to you. And please feel free to put any questions in the chat. So toward the end, when we get to it, we can, if something comes up during our presentation, it'll be available for us to take a look at.
So parents, Stephanie and I are both very much aware that parents know their kids best, right? You know what works for them. You know how your kids learn. But what we want to try to help you do is understand how to harness that information in order to support them best. Both of us use a questioning model in order to guide discussions and dig deeper and to help parents understand and help parents help us to understand how best to support their children and what might work. And we're going to use that same questioning model in our presentation today. Stephanie?
Okay, so first we're going to start off with distance learning tips and strategies. And the reason we're going to be doing that is because everyone is in some kind of distance learning situation right now. I mean, whether, to the extreme where some, students are in private school full time, even they are going back to school, like their classroom is going to quarantine for however many days, or students that are going back to public school Wednesdays, they're going to be at home. So regardless of, regardless of what school situation your child is in, we are all in some kind of distance learning environment right now. So we thought it was really important that we address that. And we will also move on to a lot of other different topics. But one thing to keep in mind as we go through these distance learning strategies is that all these different pieces of the puzzle I like to call it pieces of the puzzle because they're all interrelated. So if your child isn't doing well in school, you'd be surprised that you might need to look at some other piece that you might not have thought about, such as wellness or nutrition, and there's just so many different areas. We're going to get into many of them, but I just want to keep it in mind that all these pieces that we go into, they're all interrelated, and they will all contribute to your overall well-being of your child and their success in the distance learning environment.
Well, the first thing I want to talk to you about is one of those puzzle pieces is wellness, health and wellness. So I'm not going to get into all of these in detail, but you really do want to pay attention to nutrition. Make sure your child's getting a balanced diet, and by balanced, you want to make sure they're getting their fruits and vegetables to give them their vitamins. You want to make sure that they're getting enough fiber, enough nutrients. Just try to be aware of the quick sugars. Quick sugars are obviously sugar, candy, things like that. Lots of carb loading, pastas, breads. They tend to create blood sugar spikes and swings, which can affect mood, it can affect focus, and affect anxiety. All of those things are just something to keep in mind. Children need regular exercise. Everyone, parents, children, all of us. For the screen time, you really want to create a balance. Obviously, with distance learning, everyone's on a screen, right? We're working on our screens, we're in class on our screens. Even when kids are back in the classroom, they're going to be using screens more than usual. So you want to be mindful to make sure that there's that balance. And make sure your kids are taking breaks. Make sure that they're stopping and they're getting off of that screen at least 2 hours prior to going to bed. Circadian rhythms can really be, they're central to everything we do. So everybody has an internal clock, the circadian rhythm, and if that circadian rhythm is thrown off, it can affect mood, it can affect focus, it can affect weight gain, it can affect so many different things. And so just something to keep in mind, the light from the screens can affect your circadian rhythms. And I could go on about the science, but I put a link for you at the bottom or a citation so you can look more into it yourself. And as well with the circadian rhythms, you want to make sure your kids have a consistent bedtime, roughly. And that can be hard to do, especially as they get older, but it's really important. Um, and a bedtime routine is something that with little kids we tend to pay attention to, but as kids get older, we don't really tend to focus on it as much, because we're not as involved in their bedtime. But even the older kids need, even adults, we need that bedtime routine to unwind. And possibly one of the most important things, though, is the mindset that we have. Um, this is not normal life. And so you need to give yourself and give your children grace. You need to be flexible. Things that you would normally not allow and be really strict about during normal times might be something you become a little bit more laid back or open about in this different environment and situation. Oh, okay. I'm not going to outline all of this, but this is the the American Academy of Pediatrics and the World Health Organization have both out. Oh, we lost it, Steph.
Sorry about that.
Okay, we were both clicking through. Have both outlined screen time limits and sleep requirements, and so this is age organized by age for you to reference later. Another thing to consider is mental health. You might be aware that since the beginning of this pandemic, an increasing number of both adults and children have been struggling with mental health. There's been an increase in anxiety and depression. And so mental health needs to take priority. It can affect our ability to parent. It can affect children's ability to focus and perform well. And it really needs to be something that we're all aware of. Our mental health affects our children's mental health and vice versa. And just a quick note, what is going on? Wait, hold on. There we go. Just a quick note. When children struggle with mental health, it may not necessarily just look like a mental health issue. Anxiety doesn't always look like anxiety. Depression doesn't always look like depression. Mental health issues can affect focus, motivation, ability to organize. And so if your child suddenly looks like they have a learning issue when they never had a learning issue before, this might be something you want to consider and question. There might be something mental health wise going on there. Organization is another thing you want to take into consideration. We are what we eat. Human beings are very affected by all stimuli. So what we put into our body, if you're eating healthy foods, you're going to feel better. If you're eating junky foods, you're not going to feel as well. If you are in a very stimulating environment, you are going to feel more stimulated. A soothing environment, it will help you feel more soothed. And it's the same for the workspace that your child has. So their space needs to be as organized as possible. And you'll notice I wrote a place for everything and everything in its place with a little question mark. Obviously, we're all in the house all the time. Keeping everything organized all the time is a little bit harder. But there should be a place for things, and we should try periodically to straighten up as best we can. Children should have a designated workspace. They shouldn't be working in the family room one day and their bedroom another. They need to have a designated place to work. They might be standing one day and sitting another, and that's okay. But they should have a place where their work items are, and that they're always there. And just routines are really, really important. I talked about the routines for circadian rhythm. Routines are settling. It gives people a feeling that they're in control. Little kids in an elementary school, and sometimes even the older kids, they have the teachers post what we're going to be doing during the day or during the class period, because it makes people feel comfortable knowing what's coming next. And so having a routine and knowing what to expect is really beneficial. And finally, we're gonna touch a little bit on IEPs and special education. We're not going to focus on it solely, because obviously all of these supports are beneficial for children who don't have learning disabilities as well. But it's important to know if your child does. Um, so if you're not sure, talk to your teacher, talk to your child's teachers, their doctor, an educational professional. I did include the qualifications for an IEP and a 504 in there. They are a little bit different. So it's there for you, and I'm happy to answer questions if you have specific questions about that later on. Um, if your child has psychoeducational testing and an IEP, just be aware that that psychoeducational testing is considered expired after 3 years because of the way that children change as they mature and as they grow. Um, and just a final note before I hand it off to Stephanie, and she's going to talk about this a little bit more. With distance learning, if your child has a 504 or an IEP, parents are going to need to be a little bit more hands-on than what they're used to. Obviously, you need to advocate for your children, and the school should be attempting to provide all of their accommodations virtually. But some accommodations are much easier to provide in person. And if your child has that kind of accommodation, if they benefit from the tap on the shoulder to keep them keep them focused, or manipulatives and they're not always sure how to use them, sometimes they need a person with them that you might need to step in and help with that.
So I'm going to talk about a little bit more about advocacy and give you some suggestions related to that. So just first and foremost, know that you are your child's best advocate. We have a lot of professionals in our lives. We have teachers, we have school administrators, we have counselors, but you are going to be the one that is going to need to advocate for your child. As we talked about before, you know your child best. You know how they learn, you know where they struggle, you know their strengths, you know their needs. So with all that knowledge, and that you care, you love them the most, your child is counting on you basically to advocate for them. And that is your role as an advocate. So it's important though, if you do have a IEP or 504, or you might think your child's a disability and you might think that they might need one, it's really important that you know your rights. And that is really tricky because there's a lot of information out there. But I recommend that in order to learn about your rights, that there's so many different ways to learn. There's YouTube videos, there's podcasts, there's books, there's a website called Rights Law, there's lots of different sources out there. And I encourage you to really know your rights and not expect that it's going to be delivered to you and that someone was actually going to inform you. Just so do your best to learn about what they are. One thing that this applies to any child is to know who is who in the school, especially when you change schools. Like if you're going from elementary to middle to high school, who's who in the school? Because if you have a problem, you need to know who to take it to. You want to take it to the best person that can handle the situation that you have. So if your child's really struggling, if they do have an IEP, you want to know who is the special education, who is the child's case manager, who is the person in the building, who is the special ed department head, who is the special ed administrator, who is the counselor, who is the counselor's supervisor. All these people are really important. So those are people in the school. And then there's people that are outside the school that are also really helpful to know who they are, like the special ed director, the compliance unit. There's all sorts of people. I encourage you to really know who these people are and get directly to the right person when you have difficulty. And you should also ask for outside help if needed. There are professionals to work with. There's disability rights organizations. It could be specific to your child's disability. Like like in Montgomery County, there's X-Minds for children on the autism spectrum. There's CHAD for students that have ADHD. There's learning disability organizations, etc. So you can reach out to them. Also, there's your PTA. Maybe you have, I hope, I'm a special education vice chair of the MCC PTA, if you're familiar with that. So I encourage you to get involved with your PTA, and hopefully you have a special education rep in your school that can help you through the PTA, or even just reach out to the PTA president. And also, every state has a parent resource center. So it's called Parents Place of Maryland in Maryland. So if you can reach out to them and they can answer your questions directly. Another thing to consider is expressing any concerns that your child is having to staff. Again, this is disability, no disability. If your child is having difficulty, make sure you reach out. And if you could try, one suggestion is to try to schedule some regular check-ins with your child's teacher to make sure that they're doing okay. And another thing you can do, again, with disability or no disability, is to establish some kind of homeschool communication system. So that could, if your child does have an IEP or 504, that is something you can actually add to the plan, and to have a regular communication system that could be like a shared Google Doc where you communicate with teachers and staff members two-way, or it could be something one-way where you're getting regular information from your child's teachers and people who work with them in order to learn more about what's going on, and to also you could provide input. And could be one or two ways. So the school counselor is someone that's really important for your child. One, just to get support, and two, they are generally the person who handles 504 plans, and they are also generally the person to reach out to if you want to schedule a parent-teacher conference. And I love parent-teacher conferences because they're informal, and you can talk a lot about your child, and it's a good opportunity, especially if your child is in middle school or high school, where they may have as many as 8 different teachers. So if you can get everybody in the same room in order to talk about how school is impacting your child, talk about their strengths, their challenges, and it's just a good opportunity to have that discussion. Another suggestion I highly recommend is knowing your child's IEP or 504 plan if they have one. A lot of parents, they get overwhelmed, and especially an IEP can be very, very long. But I encourage you to read it and know what supports that they're being offered. Because if you don't know it, then how are you going to advocate for your child? So if you know what their accommodations are and their goals, then you can actually determine whether those plans are actually being implemented. Because what is good is a plan if it's not being implemented, right? So especially with your child at home, you can have more access to see whether your child is actually receiving some of these accommodations, and note if you feel like that maybe it's not being implemented as written. And as a reminder, a lot of parents don't know this, that you can call an IEP or 504 meeting at any time. So, exercise that right. If you want to discuss some things, I suggest that you do that, and not wait till for an IEP, not wait till your annual review. You could do it if there's problems. Go ahead and call it. And you could escalate as needed within the school, within the district, and don't feel afraid to do that. And the last thing is just checking the IDLP. If your child has an IEP or 504, they will have an individualized distance learning plan, and the school is supposed to be implementing everything that's on the IEP or 504, but there's certain things that they can't, specifically, for example, proximity to the teacher. That's not something you can actually implement in a home environment. So anyway, but most things should really be on there, and a lot of things should not be eliminated. If there's too many things are eliminated, make sure you have a meeting with your school to discuss that. And or if you're dissatisfied, or you could just want to discuss it, or you want to add something, please feel free to call those meetings as needed. The next topic, let's change gears a little bit. How can I enable my child to engage socially and participate in leisure activities and family time? Now, again, this is very, we're taking a sharp curve here, but again, these are all pieces of the puzzle, and they're all equally important. So we want to make sure that that your students are staying in touch with friends and family, maybe calling, texting, Zooming, visiting in person safely, if that's something you're comfortable with. Some ideas just are having Netflix movie parties, helping your children engage in book clubs and sports. There's some sports that are going on right now that a lot of people find that are safe, and their kids are enjoying it. And family time. It's very important. We're with our families a lot these days. So if you can come up with some regular game nights or movie nights, um, some hikes or bike rides, things that your family can enjoy doing together, it's always a positive thing to have that engagement. And family meals are always positive if you can have them together when, it might be breakfast, lunch, or dinner, who knows, but whenever, try to make some regular meal times. And also, it's nice if you can schedule parent child special time so they can get that one on one attention. That could alleviate, you'd be surprised at how much stress and anxiety that could alleviate by your child just getting some positive attention. And I encourage you to, if your child does have a sibling, to encourage sibling bonding time and have set some time aside for your children to go exercise together or play a board game together, and just kind of maybe set that time for them. And make sure your child has downtime and relaxation. It can't be work, 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 work all the time. They should have clubs and high interest activities. There should be hobbies they can enjoy, and make sure you're setting break times for them, encouraging them to have some downtime, and especially with screen-free activities, exercise that Elise talked about, so important. And if they have any interests like that they want to learn, this is a great time, right? They can learn all about whatever their geology or whatever they're into, learn about rocks. And remember not to overload them. It's good to have some just quiet downtime. That's not related to screens. And I'll pose another question, which is, how can my parenting support my child's success? So one thing to consider is that parenting is just more intense these days, and it's just kind of a reality that we just need to do, like, just acknowledge. I think that acknowledgement can be helpful. It's just hard. Sometimes things are just hard, and this is a hard time. And there's just increased need for a more hands-on parenting. So your independent child who is getting good grades and turning in all their homework might now be a time where you're going to need to make sure they're getting what they need. So that's why I would suggest getting involved in your child's schoolwork and their wellness, and making sure your kids are on task in school, like checking in on them. Did they sign in? Are they having healthy habits? Back to what Elise was saying. And I don't think this is the time where we want to really go for the independence right now, but incrementally, as you see them doing better and better, and they're more successful in many ways, you could kind of incrementally allow for independence. And if possible, I would suggest trying to schedule your work hours around your child's need for support. So if you're able to, not everyone can, but if you're able to, for example, like have lunchtime, schedule your lunchtime when they have lunch and things like that. And some people are essential workers, a lot of people working outside the home. If you can afford it, consider hiring help either in person or online, and enlist your family members or trusted neighbor or friends to help you. And the last thing would be if you could consider having a pod, which is like if you have shared childcare duties, and maybe also helping with your child logging in and that kind of thing, especially for younger kids, to have a safe pod that you feel comfortable with. We're going to move on to a different topic.
So as we're going to start by talking about supporting your kids, and we already did a little bit, but supporting your kids where they are. So if switching schools is not an option for you, or you don't want to, or whatever, how can you support your child where they are in the classroom situation that they are currently in? And we're going to do that by harnessing their strengths in order to compensate for their needs. So a couple things to note before I start talking about these. First, please understand that strategies need time to settle, right? So if you try it once and it doesn't work, it doesn't mean that it's not the right strategy for your child. It could take at least 5 times or a whole week if you're trying it every day, to really settle and for you to really get a feel for whether it works for your child, right? The child has to get comfortable with it. They have to get a feel for it. And then if it's, kind of working, but not really working by the end of that time period, instead of just trashing it, tweak it, tailor it towards your to your child, and be patient because it really is a process. And just keep in mind that, you know, everyone is unique. And so what works for one learner may not work for another learner. So I'm going to provide you a bunch of different strategies for different areas of struggle and different areas of strength. It's going to be trial and error. And then finally, your child doesn't have to have a learning disability, or not finally, but your child doesn't have to have a learning disability to benefit from accommodations. They need to have a learning disability for your school, for the school to be required to accommodate them. But you can absolutely teach them these strategies for themselves. You can help them implement them, and these are lifelong strategies for any learner. And finally, meet them where they are. Like Stephanie said, you want to incrementally provide support. You want to provide support and incrementally move them towards independence. But you know, there's just like too much support. You know, you're doing the work for them. Not enough support, they're getting frustrated. You have to find that sweet spot. It's kind of a dance. So, does your child learn best visually? I have found in all of my years in the classroom that many students really benefit from visual organization, even if they're not primarily a visual learner. Visually organizing materials, visually organizing information tends to be really beneficial to comprehending and taking in that information. So I've given you a list of common struggles. That's obviously not all of them, and some ideas to try. A couple that I want to just pull out is organizing information into tables and color coding. And then also using, for a child who needs to visually organize but also needs to move, taking those ideas that you would put on an idea web or a table or whatever and putting them on flashcards. And then they can physically move them. They can arrange them on the floor. They can put them on the wall. They can make a game out of them. That also helps tremendously. And I provided you some examples. You'll see on the top left, that's an idea web. Shows the relationship between ideas. The bottom right is a Venn, which can be done for 2 to how many ever circles you need. Typically, you'll see 2 or 3 circles. And I've given you links to where I've pulled those from, so you can also get both of those pages provide information of how to use those items. I wanted to talk a little bit about this one. I had a student who was given an assignment. It was literally just a list of questions on a page. And he was having a hard time seeing which questions he had answered, which questions he hadn't answered. It was all just text. And so we organized his questions onto a table. You can see the questions in purple and spaces for him to answer below. In addition to that, he was given a project that he was supposed to be working on in tandem to his reading. And it was going to be an end of the unit project, and they had to create a scrapbook from what they were reading. And he was having a hard time doing both of these, and the directions for the project were here, and the reading was here. And so we put it all in one place. And for him, it was very helpful to have everything visually together. He had the questions, he could answer his questions and put the details. And then he had, you can see the blue is actually the criteria for the project. So he could keep it in mind as he was answering the questions and brainstorm for his project all in one place. Here are some examples of color coding for directions and multi-step questions. Okay, moving on. Does your child need to move a lot? We're going to practice some of these in a little bit. Some noteworthy things. A lot of the times, some teachers are great. They will allow your child to stand during class. Some will even allow your child to pace during class if they have to. Some don't, okay, which is fine. So there are some things to use in place of that. There are wobble stools, yoga balls, pedals that go underneath the desk where kids can pedal their feet. Engaging the core or moving some sort of the body, which is, shaking the foot, something is really beneficial. I did want to talk about fidgets real quick. Fidgets became a big fad a couple of years ago. A lot of parents are very familiar with fidget spinners. Fidgets they're great. They're really beneficial, but kids have to be taught how to use them. So just keep in mind, fidgets should be something that kids can do mindlessly without looking at it. So shaking their foot, flipping a pencil or a pen. The fidget spinner should be something that they do not have to look at. It's completely something to just occupy the hands mindlessly. And that's the whole idea. It is occupying your body without occupying your mind, because your mind should be focused on the learning. So I've given a bunch of strategies here, but I'm gonna keep going, and I'm happy to answer questions about anything I don't touch on. Is your child able to articulate their thoughts well verbally? Some kids are really, really verbal, but they struggle getting ideas down on paper. So have them talk it out. They could talk. This works for any subject. Math, have them verbally walk you through a problem. They're having trouble writing an essay. Tell me about the book you read. Tell me about what you want to write. Answer the question to me out loud, and then it makes it easier to put it on paper. When you're prompting them, try to do it as often as you can with questions. Stay away from leading statements so that they're in the driver's seat. And then I've given it a couple more. I'm noticing the time, so I'm gonna move through. I just want to make a quick note on teamwork. If your kids are really social, teamwork and study groups are fantastic. Just make sure that they're on task. And also be aware that kids tend to default to something called tandem work, which is I do this part, you do that part, and then we copy each other's answers. That is not teamwork, and both kids are going to miss out on learning the information they're copying. So there are two types of teamwork. One would be let's both work through each item together. The other type is I'm going to do this part, you're going to do that part, and then we're going to check each other's work and make sure it's accurate before we copy and trade. And so that way they're each involved in every piece of the learning. I've given some strategies also for some areas of need: focus, organization of time, independence. I want to accentuate again the benefit for both focus and organization of time, independence as well. The visual schedule, and I've only listed it in the middle section, but for kids who struggle with all three of these things, having a to-do, this is what you do first, this is what you do second, this is what you do third, it will keep them on task. It'll help reduce any sort of anxiety and about moving. It helps reduce distraction, and it helps them keep on the flow and keep things going and be more independent. Okay, so now I've talked for quite some time. So we're going to take a little bit of a break, but it's going to be a guided one. So when kids take brain breaks, and you can absolutely use this at work, use this with them, they can do it themselves, you can do it. 3 things you want to keep in mind that are beneficial: breath, core, and envisioning. We're going to focus on all 3. I'm going to try to combine them for you a little bit. A break should always involve some sort of movement, especially when you've been sitting in the chair for so long. But sometimes you need to take a break during class and during a meeting and during a time that you can't get up. And so we're gonna practice that. Ideally, if your children are taking a break in between classes, it should be a screen-free break. Let them give their eyes and their brain a rest. Okay, so we're gonna start with focusing on breathing. There's 2 different kinds of breath. There's the longer inhale, shorter exhale, which is something that athletes often use to rev themselves up. And then if you reverse that ratio, have a longer exhale, okay, it's actually very calming and focusing. And you want everyone sit up, engage your core. So we're going to sit up. And when we breathe in, we're going to breathe in as much as we can, fully to fully inflate the lungs. And when we exhale, we're going to exhale fully and try to get all that stale air out. Okay. When you'll notice that when you're anxious, you tend to breathe faster, much more shallow breaths. That's your fight or flight mechanism kicking in. You want to get more oxygen. But you are also increasing your store of stale air. So in order to calm the body, you want to get rid of that stale air and breathe out as much as you possibly can. So we're going to take 2 breaths. We're going to breathe in for 2, hold it for 4 seconds, and then breathe out for a count of 4. Okay, we're going to do that twice. So keeping your core engaged. Everybody take a deep breath in. 2, hold, 2, 3, 4, and release. 2, 3, 4. Get it all out. Okay, one more time. Deep breath in. 2, hold, 2, 3, 4, and then release. 2, 3, 4. Okay, and then also another thing that helps with calming is stretching the core. So we're going to envision we're a tree, and we're going to reach up high just like the tree, the leaves of the tree, and the wind is going to blow us to the side and stretch that side of your body, and then the wind's going to blow us back to the other side, stretch the other side of the body, and then that wind is so fierce it's going to twist us, and it's going to then twist us the other way. So that should have been a little bit calming and also wake you up just a bit, help you with some focus.
Well, thank you, Elise, for making me relax for the next part of the presentation. I enjoyed that. Thank you. So we're going to move on to something different. My favorite topic is school options. And the reason I specifically want to talk about it today is because many parents are thinking about changes. They're thinking, maybe distance learning isn't working for me. My child's struggling. I'm thinking about new options. I'm thinking about the next school year. And a lot of parents are just in that mindset of options. So I want to multiple options that you can think about for school. And again, I just feel like it's the right time to discuss different options so you won't feel stuck, because there are a lot of different things you can do. And then I'm going to go into the different reasons why you may or may not choose a particular option. But first, I'm just going to discuss them. So the question is, what types of school options are available for my family? And as you can see, there are multiple. There's probably more than you realize. So I'm just going to go through each one sort of quickly. And then again, we're going to go into the different reasons why you may or may not choose a certain type. So public school, I think a lot of us are familiar with. But there's different parts of it that you might, just to bring to your attention, I want you to be thinking about. So in public school, there are, especially as in the older grades, you have electives. You could choose a study hall. There's different gifted and magnet programs that are available to students. And you want to look at different levels. Like some students might need a supported class, while others might do best in honors or even AP. And all the different, especially elementary level, I believe, and I think middle school too, they have a language immersion program. I guess it depends on your school district. So there's different language immersion programs, and there's a lot of high school choice these days, especially in Montgomery County. There's international baccalaureate programs. There's tech ed, where you could get a certificate, and some, could be cosmetology or automotive. At the end of your school, you could come out away with being able to have a career, which is pretty cool. Also, you could have dual enrollment, so you could be in say like Montgomery College while you're also in school, in high school. And to note, just elementary school, there is going to be more set curriculum, not as many choices, but there's still there's the magnet programs and the language immersion things that you can sign up for possibly, or get in the lottery at least. Um, in public school, you have the opportunity to have the IEP and 504, which 504 actually could apply to different other situations as well. But the IEP is really going to apply to a public environment. And in with having an IEP could qualify you for special education services. It could qualify you for different programs and special schools and resource class where you could gain some skills and get your specially designed instruction during that time. And it'll also give you opportunity for related services such as physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech. So that's all provided in the public school environment. Now we want to look at private school, and there's just some different things to think about when you're considering a private school. Private school, you have a lot of choices, especially in this DC metro area. There's so many different options. There's learning, you can choose a school that is really tailored to your child's individual learning style. And you can look at different philosophies, like think about what your family's own philosophy and values are, and what kind of environment you would like your child to learn in. And you can look at just the right fit for your individual learner. And there's, as I said, there's many options. I'll just give you a few online, which is, I really distinguish that from virtual learning, or distance learning that we're kind of dealing with now, because there's a lot of tried and true programs out there that some are accredited, some aren't. But just some, as I said, tried and true opportunities for online learning, which are full day or part day, depending on what you choose. There's Montessori. There are schools that have a social justice component. That's the focus of their learning. There's Waldorf. There's also boarding schools and wilderness schools and religious schools. So it really could be tailored to your individual child and your own family's values and needs. And then there's private therapeutic schools. And these are schools for students with learning differences. And a lot of them are day schools. There's many of them, again, in the DC area. And then there's also boarding schools and some treatment centers for maybe some substance use difficulties or mental health treatment centers. And then there's homeschooling, which is very individualized, and homeschooling can look so many different ways. And it's really very different than what a lot of people think about, like mom across from the child, across from the dining room table for 6 hours a day. That's usually not what homeschooling looks like, actually. It can be very, very individualized to the individual child, and also for the family and what they want to accomplish and how they want their child to learn. You can take a very individualized approach. And it could be good for students with learning differences as well, because some of these things that, if you're more in a more traditional environment, you might not, you might have a lot of more issues in that environment and going in a homeschool environment where it's tailored to your child's needs. You might not have to, some of those issues might go away, actually. And again, you can tailor it to their lifestyle for your whole family, or it could just be like one child with one parent, depending on your needs. And there's just a lot of different options, as I said. And a hybrid situation is two options or more together. So you could have part day homeschooling with a part day private school option or something like that. So the question is, how do I know what school environment is best for my child and my family? It's $1 million question, right? So these are the things that when I work with parents, because I help parents figure out the best school options for their children, I ask a lot of questions. So I'm giving you the questions that I would ask, or I would be considering when I'm working with families. So in these times, this is not a typical question I would consider, but in these times it's certainly important, which is to ask yourself, what are your safety and risk factors and comfort level with the virus exposure? So I think that'd be first and foremost, like if you have high risk individuals at home, if they're not, whether or not they have vaccines. I know children under 16 right now, there are no vaccines for them. So, if your child is immunocompromised, you have someone like that at home, you'd really consider the concerns about exposure. Next, I feel like would be really important up there is financial decisions that need to be considered. What is your budget? Do you qualify for financial aid? A lot of private schools offer financial aid, even a full ride in some schools, depending on your finances. Um, Also, you need to look at outside financial resources that you may have. I don't know, maybe you have some family members that be willing to chip in and help you out, or some community uh, availability for resources. Um, and I think what's really important is to really weigh the cost and benefit. I mean, even if you feel like you can't afford it, and some people like really can't afford it, but you have to like weigh like how much your child is struggling. So if your child is just cannot, just need something different, and you find a really perfect fit for them, it might just be worth it. And maybe you need to do something different in another area of your life to be able to afford it. So that's something you have to think about. And again, these tutoring and therapies and coaching, they all cost money. So again, you're sort of weighing this in with your financial decisions. And another question to consider is, what amount of support does your child need, and what is your ability to provide that support? So if you have two parents that are working at home and you're able to provide what your child needs, that might work for you at home. Or if your parents are both out working, they're essential workers, or whatever reason they're working, then you maybe homeschooling might not be a good fit for you. Just for example, although there are single parents that do make homeschooling work if that's what they want. And then you have to consider the age of the child, how independent they are, and if they have special needs. So these are all factors to consider when choosing a school. And then another thing is, Elise talked about it earlier, was your mental health. Like, what mental health concerns do you have for yourself, your partner, and your child? These are all really important. You need to make sure that you have life balance for yourself. I mean, it's that whole idea of put your oxygen mask on first, right, in the airplane. So you want to make sure that your oxygen mask is on first, so you can take care of your family. And if you have mental health concerns, then you need to think about that, and how well we will work together. You will work, at home or not at home. It's all just something to consider. And if your child has mental health considerations we have to look at, and also their need for routine and flexibility. Some children going back to school, if they have, especially maybe a child on the autism spectrum who has maybe challenges with flexibility, that might not be a good fit for them, perhaps, because if their class has to go into quarantine for a week or two, the back and forth, that it's just, that might not be a good fit. So it's just something to consider. On the other hand, they might need that social opportunities. So again, it's just these things to weigh. And and just considering overall your child's needs. And just a little continuation, and we're getting to the end here. So bear with us. And we have a time for questions at the end. But question is, what kind of educational fit does your child need? And again, going back to those learning styles that Elise was talking about, how does your child learn best? What is their best learning environment? Do they do well in a traditional school setting, or would an alternative learning setting be better for them? Something to think about. And what struggles does your child have in school? Do they have special needs, learning difficulties? Are they gifted? Are they twice exceptional? Twice exceptional means gifted with learning differences together. And and distance learning, and how does that work for them? And that leads into my next question, which is, what are your child's past experiences with distance learning in school? So is your child doing well in distance learning environment or not? Did your child do well even in normal circumstances? I mean, I know we've all been home for a year, but think back to reality, and like, does your child do well in an in-person traditional school? Some children are bullied. Some children actually are having difficulty, and a lot of parents are finding themselves sort of on, they've learned a lot with their child at home, and they're realizing, wow, maybe school wasn't the best option. Like more traditional school, it wasn't the best option. And they're realizing, as you can see more in this distance learning setting, they can actually see maybe school was not so great to begin with, and we got to make some changes. I'm seeing a lot of that. And And how does your child do with independent learning? Could maybe a Montessori approach would be good, where they can have more independence, or maybe a homeschooling situation where they can focus on their interests. And again, looking at their needed supports and where is the best place that they can get those supports. Other question is, what are the social needs of your child? How's your child doing? Are they feeling isolated in this distance learning setting? They really need the in-person socialization? So you're going to weigh these things. Are virtual friendships working for them? Is it not? Does your child really need to have clubs and activities that really gets them motivated and engaged? Or is your child okay with just having fewer clubs and activities? So those are the kind of things you think about when you're looking at different schools, maybe even private schools, like, or private versus public, etc. And my last question is, what are your family's personal preferences for school? So that's really just about you and what you want for your family. What are your values? What's your educational philosophy? If your child has special interests, say they're like a world-class gymnast, where can they go to school to support that? And how you feel about togetherness, like being home as a family, being together, and independence. So, boarding school might be a good fit if you value independence. So there's just so many different things to think about when choosing a school. So that's sort of the end of our presentation. So we are going to get to some questions in a minute, but we did want to take the opportunity to thank you. We really appreciate you being here tonight on a Sunday evening. And so we really hope that you got something out of it. There's a lot we presented. We're going to provide you with the slides and the video recording of this presentation. So make sure you check your email later, probably tomorrow. And, if you would like to reach out to us, here's a way to reach out to us. And, or if you need individualized support, we're happy to help you. So Elise's contact information is here. She's with Elevated Learning Solutions, LLC.com. And I'm Stephanie, and I'm with exceptionaleducationalsolutions.com. As you can see, our emails are posted here. So please, if you want to contact us, please reach out, and we provided our phone numbers as well.
We're both also on Facebook, but I would say this is probably the easier way to get a hold of us.
Yeah, I think my Facebook is off. You can get to my Facebook from my website.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But yeah. And so we want to take this opportunity to answer any questions, and we're going to take a look at the chat now. So feel free to, we can look at the chat, and we can also, if you want to speak up and chime in, that's also okay. So should I stop sharing now?
No, just leave it.
Just keep it like that. Okay.
Yeah. So I see a question: should all IEP students receive an individual distance learning plan, or is this something that have to be requested? So if all of your child's IEP accommodations are easily implemented as they are, the school may not go down the distance learning plan route because they don't feel like they need to. But make sure, check with your, check your child's IEP, make sure that everything is being implemented and that your child is getting the benefit out of it that they should be getting. And if not, and things need to be tweaked, then you might need to talk to the school about the distance learning plan. Any other questions?
And someone asked, with the distance learning, how do you get your child to be social? Yeah, that's a good question. I tried to address some ideas, like with if your child's in public school and they have clubs. I don't know, my son's school has a ton of clubs. I guess it's probably individual to the school, but if you can look in different clubs that they offer, and also there's different things outside of school that you could sign up for. Like the rec center has some things, or if your child likes theater, I know there's different programs out there.
It's also a very age specific. I think for younger kids, and my kids are much younger than Stephanie's, and that's been a struggle for us because my kids don't just automatically call their friends on Facebook or on FaceTime or on the phone or whatever. And so we've done masked outdoor play dates. So the kids can run around, they can see their friends. We have attended virtual birthday parties where one mom, she organized it and she dropped off an activity bag to everybody that was invited. And then we were all on Zoom. So everyone was doing the same activity at the same time. The kids felt like they were doing it together. And they had a lot of fun doing that. Um, and so there are ways to do it, but I think for the little kids, it takes a lot more planning and it's a lot more hands-on.
Yeah. And feel free to turn your camera and microphone at this time if you would
Oh yeah,
like.
you
Yeah. Thank you, Elise. That's great. Um, Someone asked, are you recommending the suggested visual support strategies be implemented by the parent or teacher? So I think that would be a question for you, Elise.
Yeah, so that's a good question. If your child has an IEP or 504, then many of those strategies, if the child requires it and it's on their IEP or on the 504, the teacher should be doing their best to implement those strategies. If your child doesn't have a 504 or an IEP and they don't qualify for one, that's something that you would work with your child on. You would teach them how to do it, you would do it with them, and then eventually they should be able to do it by themselves. With strategies, the goal is always independence, right? And so you always want to teach the child how to do it with them, maybe start off doing it for them, do it with them, and then slowly they take on more and more until they can do it themselves.
Someone asked, my son does not want to even try to be organized. I think he can't. I think he thinks he can't do it, and his disorganization is affecting his ability to get his work done. What sorts of things can I do to help him see that this needs to be worked on?
So this would be a situation where you really need to step in more than you probably think you should need to at this time, because it's an unprecedented situation. And you want to what I would do is I would sit down with your child and I would talk to them about what areas they feel they're most disorganized in and are the hardest, and then pick two to start with and work on them together. Come up with a plan. How can we attack these together? And then once those two have become a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more routine, then maybe add another area. And slowly your child should be able to see that he or she can do it, even if you're doing it together. And then that will help build the confidence. It's very hard for a child who has no confidence in themselves to become independent, and so there's a lot of hand holding there at the beginning, and they eventually get to see, okay, we're doing it together, but I'm doing it. It's always a process.
Right. So this parent said, any suggestions on how to get reluctant fourth grader to utilize these types of strategies and embrace them if they are not coming from the teacher?
That's always a tough one, because the parents are just, most kids won't hear it from their parents. I would say enlist the teacher, get buy-in. Maybe talk to the teacher one-on-one first, and say, this is what I'd like to have my child try, but they're not going to hear it from me. Can you help me? Can you suggest that he or she do this with me? And then maybe they'll be more open to it. I do that with my son all the time because even though he knows what I do, mom knows nothing. So there are plenty of times where I have talked to the teacher and said, hey, listen, I'd like my child to do this. Can you please suggest it? And sometimes even a meeting with the parents, the teacher, and the child helps, so that the student knows that the parents and the teacher are on the same page. They hear it come from the teacher. The parent knows it's coming from the teacher, and everyone's kind of like in sync.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I agree with that. The more
Yeah.
people on board giving the same message, the better,
Yeah.
right? So there's a question here. I think I could answer this. I have a child who is withdrawing from Zoom. Do you have any suggestions for helping teachers understand the child's anxiety rather than seeing this as a behavior problem? And yes, anxiety can definitely manifest itself in many ways, including behavior issues. And that is unfortunate if the teacher is not able to see that. I guess I'd first recommend, having a conference with the teacher and seeing if you can really explain how you see it, and maybe even bring on board a mental health professional or the counselor, and just try to see if there's a way to get the teacher to understand that the behavior is stemming from the anxiety. So that's one way. And um, you might need to, like, if they really have significant anxiety, it might that could qualify your child for a 504 plan, and having different supports. So if you can get a diagnosis from a therapist or a physician, and show that your child does have this anxiety disorder at this point, these challenges, that if they could qualify probably for a 504 plan, and supports could be in place, and then the teacher is going to need to provide those supports as needed.
Yeah, and sometimes Stephanie and I actually shared a client with very similar concerns, and my tutor that was working with her worked with her on some of the emotional component of dealing with the distance learning. Um, and so sometimes having someone else step in and support the academics from outside is also helpful in that circumstance. Um, Stephanie, there's a question. How do you go from a 504 plan to an IEP need?
Okay.
So I think both of us could probably attest to it. I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but it sounds to me um, like the parent wants to shift from one to the other. If
Yeah.
you're if your child doesn't qualify for an IEP, you can't just make a shift. They need to have IEPs require um, a documented learning disability that is significantly impeding your child's performance to the point that they need specialized instruction just to be able to perform on par with their same aged peers.
Mhm.
A 504 provides accommodations and supports for kids that don't fall under that umbrella but are still impeded.
Mhm.
So it's not, you can't really just shift from one to the other. You need to be able to qualify.
Right. So you would just, I mean, right. So not, I wouldn't automatically shift. You have to go through a process. You have to
Right?
go
It's always
through,
a process.
right. You go through even though they're similar in a lot of ways, the process of is different. And you can just actually, what you would, and I think the parent said that the child has ADD, and there are students who have ADD or ADHD who have 504s, and there are ones that have IEPs. And my personal opinion is that there's a lot more students that have with ADD or ADHD that would qualify for an IEP. But a lot of times schools, steer them in the direction of a 504. I mean, some kids don't need it, but there are students who have significant ADD or ADHD, and they really would qualify for an IEP. And they really do need that specially designed instruction. So I would suggest, if you feel that your child is having significant challenges, if you've addressed the 504, and you've had a meeting and you feel like this is just not enough, and they're not, hopefully they're implementing it, I guess, first of all. If not, anyway, you're always welcome at any point. You can go through the child find process and just state to the school that I feel, I see that my child has a disability that is impacting their learning, and learning is very broad, and their ability to function in school. And you really think about what that means. If your child, like I recently I was talking to a parent who had a child was having anxiety, stomach aches, and they were spending a lot of time in the bathroom. Think about how much learning loss the child's in the bathroom for a significant amount of time, even if it's like 10 minutes a day. I mean, how many, that's 10 minutes every single day. And that's a lot of time that's lost from learning. So I would just, think about it in a broad way of how they're being affected. And I do think a lot of students can qualify more than they're sort of being shifted toward that. So contact your the special ed department head in your school and say, I would like my child, to be evaluated for special education services. So if you send that letter, that should get the ball rolling in that direction, and they can
It
be
has to be in writing.
evaluated. What was that?
And it has to be in writing.
Yes, in writing, right? Send them an email and keep everything. Keep all your emails that you go back and forth.
Document, document, document.
Document.
There's a question. What would you suggest for a teen with ADHD who spends homework time doing anything but homework? Distance learning requires laptops, and it's hard to be over their shoulder constantly. This is something I've been dealing a lot with. The screen addiction and the stimulation that laptops provide, the distraction that laptops provide. For a kid who is very distracted by being on their laptop, I would say as often as possible, print whatever they need to do. Anything that they need, almost anything, like documents with questions that they need to fill out, math problems, much of what they need to do can be printed and then done on paper, and then they can upload pictures of it onto whatever platform the school is using. Teachers will accept it as long as the work is done. But that is also a child that benefits from a parent who is more on top of them than we would probably want to be. It can be difficult. The screen addiction is a real problem, and I would say if you can't be in your child's room when they're doing their work, and you don't feel like you can trust them to get their work done when they're by themselves, have them come to where you are. Maybe you're making dinner, have them sit at the table so that you can check on them, you can talk to them, and you can make sure that they're on task while you're doing what you need to do. And if that doesn't work, I'm happy to brainstorm with you further. There's always, there are always a lot of different things to try, but I would try those things first.
Great. I have one question that was a private message to me, so I will read it. How do you get a 504 or IEP in a private school? We just finished testing. So that's a little bit complicated question. Generally, they're going to be provided in a public school environment, but you can get what's called a service plan for an IEP. So certain services, so there's certain amount of money that's allocated to private school students. It's based on some kind of formula, and it's sort of doled out, and it seems to be, it seems to be a little bit of a random way. So kind of what amount of money is available. There will be money allocated toward providing services to students with IEPs in private schools, but it's a little bit of mystery of how that all works. So you can ask for like what you call a service plan, and if they qualify for speech or OT or something like that, a lot of times you will be able to get those services as a private school student. I know some private schools they've arranged that the public school providers will come to their school, but I think that'd be something that'll be initiated by the private school, while other times they would require that the student come into the building in person, or it could be virtual, I suppose, and they could get those services that they need. But they're not going to get a full IEP. They're not going to have the goals and all that. That would be you would get in a public environment. I think with the 504, at least you were talking about that. Would you like to talk a little bit about the 504 in private school?
Yeah, so I can actually say first that if you want a 504 and IEP written for your child and they go to a private school, the public school, your home school, they will and they have to write it up. That's like you can request free testing from the county, and they have to do it. They will write up an IEP. Not every private school will implement it though. Some private schools, same thing with 504s, some private schools will implement it, some will not. Private schools that get government funding, I think, have to. Private schools that don't get government funding, they don't need to. And some of them won't. Well, they can pick and choose which accommodations they feel are appropriate for their student population to be able to implement. So they'll say like, we'll implement up through this point, and then after this point, you're just not a good fit for our school. And private schools have the ability to do that. And then some schools will take your testing and or your IEP, and they will implement all of it, right? And that, and that's something that comes down to finding the right fit when it comes to private schools.
Right. And some private schools will have their own services. They'll have learning specialists on staff. So that might be something you consider when you're looking for a private school, if they are able and happy to accommodate students, and that's something that they do generally. Or if they're not able to accommodate those students, that's something you would want to know before you send your child to that private school. Or if they're in the private school, then to try to see what they're able to do. And you might find yourself disappointed, or you might find yourself pleased to hear what they can offer and what they can do. And you can also talk to other parents and get a sense of how accommodating they are in general. So that's all the questions I see. If anyone has any more questions, happy to answer. So yeah, so I'm glad that we were able to have this night together and to talk and to present a lot of different information. And again, please, we provided our information, and if you want to, I think I'll put it back on the previous slide. If you'd like to contact us, we would love to hear from you. And yeah, so thank you so much for being with us tonight. We enjoyed talking with you, and hopefully it was helpful to you. So thanks very much.